It is 5 in the morning at a small rail yard, frost covering the platform in a thin gray film. A locomotive sits idling, hissing faintly, steam curling off its boiler into the cold air. A crew member crouches near the driving wheels, not looking, just listening, head tilted like a mechanic checking a heartbeat. A fireman shovels coal into an open firebox, sweat already beating on his neck despite the cold morning air. The obvious assumption is simple. Steam builds up, steam pushes the pistons, the train moves. That assumption feels complete, but it's not. Steam is not the engine here. Steam is only the messenger. The thing actually doing the work has, historically, killed people by the hundreds. Here's what's actually happening. Steam never pushes a locomotive forward on its own terms. It's not muscle. It's a carrier, a way of moving energy from one place to another so something else can use it. The real work happens in a conversion most people never think about: pressure differential. Hot, expanding steam is forced into a cylinder at high pressure, and the difference between that pressure and the lower pressure on the other side of the piston is what actually shoves the piston down its stroke. The steam itself isn't muscling anything. It's setting up a pressure imbalance, and the imbalance does the shoving. That's the whole secret, hiding in plain sight under every locomotive ever built. So picture the locomotive less like a steam-powered machine and more like a chemical to mechanical converter, with steam as the middleman. Coal burns, fire heats water sealed inside an iron shell. That shell, the boiler, is where pressure builds, sometimes past 200 pounds per square inch, sometimes higher in later, more powerful designs built for speed and freight. None of that pressure is steam force in the simple sense people imagine. It's stored energy, waiting for a controlled outlet. Valve gear times exactly when steam enters and exits each cylinder, stroke by stroke, hundreds of times a minute at speed. That valve gear is the real brain of the machine. The boiler is just the muscle tissue kept tensed at the edge of rupture on purpose every single hour it runs. And here's the part most people miss. The boiler is, structurally, a controlled bomb. Not metaphorically, literally. It is a sealed pressure vessel holding water heated well past the point where, if it suddenly lost containment, it would flash into steam almost instantly, a phase change so fast it behaves like an explosive charge rather than a slow leak. Engineers don't describe it that way out loud, but the physics doesn't care what anyone calls it. That seems obvious until you scale it up. First twist: bigger boilers are not safer boilers. Intuition says a heavier, larger, more reinforced-looking locomotive should be the tougher one, the one less likely to fail catastrophically under stress. The opposite is often true. A bigger boiler holds more water, more heat, more stored pressure, which means more energy waiting to release if something goes wrong anywhere along that shell. Some of the most violent locomotive boiler failures in recorded history involved the larger, more powerful engines, the ones that looked like the safest machines on the line, the pride of the fleet. Scale that looks like strength is, in this one specific failure mode, actually stored catastrophic potential, hiding behind a coat of paint and brass trim. And a boiler failure isn't a slow leak. It's a flash event. When a crack opens under full pressure, water sitting well above its normal boiling point instantly converts to steam, expanding to roughly 1,600 times its liquid volume in a fraction of a second. That expansion doesn't trickle out politely. It detonates outward all at once with nowhere controlled to go. A single failure point, one weld, one corroded seam, one plate thinned by years of scale buildup can level a station platform, throw iron plating blocks away like shrapnel, and kill everyone standing near it instantly. This isn't rare folklore exaggerated for effect. In the era before modern codes, boiler explosions were one of the deadliest industrial hazards anywhere in the world, on land and on water both, claiming more lives in a single century than most people would guess. Scale that up again. By the early 1900s, rail networks were running thousands of these boilers every single day, all over the world, each one a pressurized vessel relying on imperfect metal, imperfect maintenance schedules, and imperfect human judgment under deadline pressure. Thousands of latent failure points, moving at speed, surrounded constantly by crews and paying passengers who had no idea what sat a few feet from their seats. The risk wasn't theoretical or rare. It was structural to the entire system, baked into how the technology worked from the very beginning. Compare it to something modern. It's the equivalent of every car on a highway carrying a small, unmarked tank of compressed gas under the hood with no national inspection requirement, no certification, and no shared standard for how thick the metal needs to be. That's roughly the world steam railways operated in for decades before anyone forced a fix. Which is why an entire invisible skeleton of safety engineering had to be built, quietly, almost apologetically, piece by piece, around something that looked completely simple from the platform. Safety valves designed to vent excess pressure automatically before it reached a dangerous threshold. Fusible plugs, small lead cord fittings designed to melt at a specific temperature and fail safely before the boiler itself could fail violently and without warning. Water gauges to make sure the crown sheet, the top interior surface of the firebox, never ran dry and overheated past safe limits. Scheduled hydrostatic testing, stamped pressure ratings, formal inspection regimes that simply did not exist when steam power first spread across continents. None of this came first. All of it was retrofitted, disaster by disaster, because the alternative kept being explosions in stations full of people. Here is where it gets stranger, and where instinct actively works against survival. When something starts going wrong with the pressure system, when a crew hears a hiss that should not be there, or watches a gauge drifting the wrong way, ordinary instinct screams to shut it down immediately. Kill the fire, stop the heat, get away from the danger as fast as possible. That instinct makes complete sense, and it is exactly wrong here. A trained engineer does not slam the system into a fast shutdown. They bleed pressure down slowly, in a deliberate, almost lazy-looking sequence, because rapid cooling can shock the metal, causing uneven contraction that cracks a boiler shell that was actually holding together just fine under steady, even heat. The wrong-looking calm response, the slow cool down that looks like inaction to anyone watching, is the one that actually prevents disaster. Panic kills, procedure survives. It is one of the strangest lessons in all of industrial safety. Sometimes doing less, slower, on purpose, is the only thing standing between routine and catastrophe. Crews drilled on this for years, specifically because the urge to act fast under pressure never fully disappears, even in people who know better and have seen the wreckage photos in training manuals. That paradox didn't come from a textbook, and it didn't come from careful theoretical planning either. It came from bodies. In the 19th century, steamboat and early locomotive boiler explosions were common enough that newspapers ran them almost routinely, like weather reports. Entire decks blown apart, crews killed instantly, passengers scalded by superheated steam clouds that could cook exposed flesh from yards away in an instant. One of the most infamous cases, the Sultana disaster on the Mississippi River in 1865, killed an estimated 1,100 to 1,200 people when its boilers failed catastrophically, making it one of the deadliest maritime disasters in American history, deadlier than the sinking of the Titanic decades later, and most people alive today have never even heard of it. It took mounting death tolls, public outrage, and a string of high-profile, well-documented disasters before governments finally stepped in and mandated formal boiler codes, standardized pressure ratings, required third-party inspections, certified materials, and welds. The rules people now take for granted as boring bureaucratic checklists exist specifically because, for decades, there were none, and the cost was measured in funerals, not fines. The regulation wasn't born from caution. It was the wreckage talking, loudly, until someone in power finally listened. Now go back to that platform at 5 in the morning. The hissing sound coming off the idling locomotive isn't leftover steam doing nothing, just background noise from a tired old machine. It's a controlled bleed, a safety valve doing exactly its job, venting excess pressure on purpose so the boiler never reaches the point where it has no choice but to fail violently instead. That little brass fitting near the top of older engines, the one that looks purely decorative, almost ornamental, is the fusible plug, engineered to melt and let go in a controlled, predictable way before the surrounding iron can rupture catastrophically and without warning. Even the locomotive's signature rhythmic chuff, the sound everyone associates with old film footage and toy trains on a shelf, is not ambient color or atmosphere. Each chuff is one controlled steam release cycle from a single cylinder, timed perfectly by the valve gear, a small, repeated, engineered detonation cycle happening dozens of times a minute, right there in plain hearing, the entire time anyone stands nearby. None of this is flawless, and it never was, even after every reform. Not every historical boiler failure traced back to pressure design alone. Plenty were operator error, overfilling, underfilling, ignoring a gauge under schedule pressure to keep a train running on time. Some came from poor water quality, where mineral scale built up slowly inside the boiler walls, insulating the metal from the water it was supposed to cool, letting that metal overheat and weaken gradually until it finally gave way under perfectly normal operating pressure. Regulations varied wildly by country, era, and operator. Some jurisdictions adopted strict inspection codes decades before others did, and enforcement on smaller or older regional lines often lagged years behind the official rulebook. Some private rail companies, especially in poorer regions or during wartime shortages, quietly skipped inspections to keep trains moving, betting that statistics were on their side. Most of the time, that bet paid off. Not always. And even today, with every modern safeguard fully in place, heritage railways running preserved steam locomotives still experience occasional pressure system failures. Rare, but never quite zero, because metal fatigues, gaskets age, and human attention slips no matter how good the underlying design becomes. This was never fully solved in any permanent sense. It was, and still is, managed day by day, inspection by inspection, which brings the whole thing back to that idling engine sitting on the frosty platform. What looks like a nostalgic, almost gentle piece of machinery, brass fittings catching the early light, curling steam, a rhythmic chuff that sounds almost musical to anyone standing nearby, is actually one of the most dangerous pressure systems humans ever learned to tame through trial, failure, and hard regulation. The steam itself isn't the star of the show. It never was. The real story is the decades of disaster, redesign, public outrage, and hard-earned procedure that slowly turned a literal bomb on wheels into something safe enough to stand next to, lean against, even sleep beside in a cab overnight. The locomotive doesn't run on steam. It runs on humanity's slow, expensive, occasionally fatal mastery of controlled pressure, refined one failure at a time. And that mastery never stayed locked inside old rail yards or museum exhibits. The exact same failure logic, a sealed vessel, superheated contents, a phase change waiting to happen in milliseconds, is sitting in places far more ordinary than any preserved locomotive. It's in a pressure cooker sitting on a stovetop right now. It's in a scuba tank strapped to someone's back 40 feet underwater, far from any quick rescue. It's even compressed into something as small and forgettable as an aerosol can sitting in a bathroom cabinet or under a kitchen sink. Different scale, same underlying physics, same hidden engineering fight against the exact same basic kind of disaster, and most people have one of these objects sitting in their kitchen or garage at this exact moment with absolutely no idea how close it sits, structurally speaking, to the same line a 19th century boiler used to cross.